Previously on El Flow.
Flaco Figueroa era la persona que grabó.
El Flaco Figueroa was the person who directed the music videos for the entire underground genre. He's part of the growth of the underground genre that today is called reggaeton.
Yo me doy cuenta de que esto es un género. Ahí es que empieza como quien dice...
I realized that this is a movement. That's when the famous perreo began. The music started to get more sexual, less street, more danceable, more clubby.
Lo único que yo podía conseguir muchachas eran los stripper clubs.
The only place I could find girls was at the strip clubs. And in the Caseria housing projects, it was the same. Who wants to dance in a music video? She's the craziest? Okay, let's go. It was like that.
Mira, yo te puedo decir de varios videos que escandalizaron.
There were several videos that scandalized some people. When we made the video for Nicky Jam and Daddy Yankee song,
Yo quiero la combi completa. ¿Qué? Yo estoy durmiendo en casa, me levanto, tengo 20,000 llamadas perdidas.
I'm sleeping at home. I get up. I have like 20,000 missed calls. I pick up the phone. I call my mom first. She's like, "Where are you? Did you see the newspapers? Turn on the news. They're looking for you. They're saying you're a pornographer who's using minors for videos, that you're going to be arrested." When I opened the window, I had 20,000 federal officers outside waiting for the warrant to search my house. I had thousands of tapes. The only thing I could do was start throwing them into the pool of the house. Wah! In the water. Wah! In the water. That's where I think the history of the genre was lost.
When the music video director Héctor El Flaco Figueroa threw his video library in the pool, including what he said were 4,000 of reggaeton's most scandalous music videos and outtakes, he didn't know why the police showed up to his house. But in 2001, a local senator of the Popular Democratic Party named Velda González was initiating, in her words, a crusade to prevent the exploitation of women, specifically minors, in reggaeton music videos, as well as regulate when and where certain extremely explicit videos could be broadcast. Not surprisingly, Velda's efforts divided Puerto Rico, with one side backing her and the other claiming that she was embarking on another censorship campaign against the movement. Reggaeton artists in particular were furious. Here's one song by reggaeton pioneers Baby Rasta and Gringo. While Velda was painted as a conservative Puritan out to get the artists, the facts bear out a picture of a more nuanced person. How do I know? Well, Velda González, to me, was not Senator González de Modesti, but Aya, my grandmother. This is El Flow, a journey to the roots of reggaeton. My name is Lilia Luciano. I'm a CBS News correspondent born and raised in Puerto Rico, the cradle of reggaeton. You're listening to episode 16, Doña Velda. When I started out making this podcast, I obviously had this episode circled in red. Because not only was I going to be talking about my grandmother and one of the most notorious incidents in reggaeton history, but also because I really wanted to get to the bottom of all of this. I mean, there are lots of people in Puerto Rico, mostly associated with the reggaeton movement, that remember my grandmother as a conservative crusader hell-bent on silencing them. And there's also a ton of other people who remember my grandmother as a prolific legislator, a feminist, a bit of a rebel, and above all, a beloved actress. I have my own memories of my Aya. But the mind is a funny thing, and I needed to figure out exactly what happened. Sadly, my Aya passed away in 2016. So to find out more about who she was, what I missed, and what actually went down, I went to visit my aunt, Mirelsa Modesti, who, along with being Velda's daughter, is also her biographer.
Titi, aquí sí que se oyen los coquís. A mí, déjame ponerme la mascarilla.
Now, for starters, for anybody who thinks that we're talking about a typical Puerto Rican politician or even a traditional grandmother, let me warn you that Doña Velda was way more than that. My grandmother had a richer life than even I knew. Her first passion was art. She was an actress, a comedian, and a dancer. In fact, her first dancing partner was quite the celebrity, actually still is. Perhaps you've heard of him, Walter Mercado, the legendary astrologer with a cult-like following. They met when they were teenagers and stayed friends for life.
I remember when I met Walter, he told me, Niña, I'm like your other grandmother. I said, what?
They met at the University Ballet, and Madame Herta Brauer was the director of the ballet. She put together a choreography for both of them, and as soon as they danced together, she saw them and she said, "You're soulmates. There's a connection between you two." And they became the first dancing couple of the company. So they start dancing together and they formed this beautiful friendship. He would call her Welda and she would call him Walter. That started because Madame Brauer, since she was German, she would say Walter. And then my mom would make fun of it and she would say, Walter, Walter. And then he would say, Welda.
That was only the start. Welda was a pioneer and also very risque for the time. She played the role of a prostitute and was a dancer in a burlesque show. In the 40s and 50s, none of this was really approved of by her parents' generation.
She was a pinup girl for the Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Air Force.
She was a pinup girl.
There's a picture of her with very little clothing on an airplane.
After dancing and modeling, Welda landed a gig as Azucena del Campo y Castillo on the television show La Criada Malcriada, The Spoiled Maid. With Welda as a star, the show became a hit, and Welda became a household name.
Tell me about Azucena.
Azucena del Campo y Castillo.
Natural de Atillo, criada de profesión, siempre a su disposición, si no me coge el tapón de Bayamón. What did Azucena do? Who was she to people?
Azucena, she was a maid in this home. Tommy Muñiz, the producer, he was also an actor, and he was the homeowner.
The wife was very fancy, and then Azucena was irreverent.
Lo siento mucho, pero esta noche vuelan San Juan y Santurce. Usted hace lo que yo digo o la boto de aquí.
I mean, you see those sketches now, and he was being abusive, but she would not take the abuse. She would talk back to him and she would say, no, ahora mijito. Maybe she didn't realize it, but she was modeling to women how to not let people treat them like that.
Yeah. On at noon, Welda brought a feminist character to the homes of Puerto Ricans across the island. The show was on for more than a decade. And though she went on to do other shows, films, and theater plays, to many Puerto Ricans, Welda would always be remembered as Azucena.
But people kept calling my mom La Criada Malcriada wherever she went. In New York, we would be walking Madison Avenue and someone would scream, La Criada Malcriada!
After a long and diverse artistic career, Welda, to everyone's surprise, decided to make a big change in 1980.
What drives her to politics?
My dad. He was the one who loved politics. She hated politics. At the beginning, she really hated it. But my dad loved politics, and he would meet with some of the governments, Muñoz Marín, the governor, and he would meet with them, and he would share his ideas. And they asked him more than once if he wanted to go into politics, and he said, no, she's the one who should go into politics.
What was the thinking? He knew people loved her.
He knew people loved her. Yeah. She was well aware that the first time that the people gave her the opportunity to get to the Senate, it was not for her that they voted, it was for Azucena, because it was Azucena who got into people's homes every day at noon, and it was Azucena who people trusted.
Welda always said that 1980 was the turning point of her life. Her first grandchild was born, my brother, and Welda won her first election. Shortly after, her husband and her mother both passed away right in the middle of her campaign. But she didn't have time to mourn. She worked tirelessly and ultimately became the first woman to hold a seat in the Puerto Rican Senate for 6 consecutive terms and became the legislator with the most bills signed into law.
What would you say was her greatest legacy or achievement in politics?
I would have to say that the laws to protect women from like domestic violence, from sexual harassment at the workplace.
The law forever associated with Velda's name is Ley 54, or Law 54, against domestic violence, passed in 1989.
It was probably her greatest achievement, yes.
And what was driving that fight? I mean, what was she exposed to?
There was someone very close to us that she was the wife of a very famous person. And she came to our house one night, I remember, and her face was all bruised. Her arms were bruised, and she was, she didn't want to call the police because, it was going to be a scandal. And I remember that my father said, we have to call the police. I mean, this can't be. There was no special law about domestic violence. It was just an aggression. And it turned out that, yes, this person had a lot of contacts and charges were dismissed. I remember that she would talk a lot about this because she said it's not the same to be abused by a stranger than by the person who lives with you, shares your bed, knows everything about you, has access to your children, to your friends. It's a lot more traumatic.
Of all the work Velda did in the Puerto Rican Senate, among the efforts closest to her heart was a law allowing single mothers to give their children their own last names. In most Latin American countries, the paternal and maternal last names are used in legal documents, so having only one was a sign that the child had not been recognized by the father, creating all types of bureaucratic headaches and discrimination. That was the Velda I knew, a person who used whatever influence she had to help the most vulnerable, especially when confronting the powerful. And that's why in 2001, nearing her 70s, and as the Senate Vice President, she went to the Puerto Rican island of Vieques to demand that the U.S. Navy stop their shelling and bombing practices on the island.
The headline-grabbing moment that I think back to was Vieques. How did she become involved in that fight?
She came one day to the office and she said, I have been invited to do civil disobedience. We have to call the attention of the international community. So she packed her bags. She went to Vieques. She lived the first time she was about 3 weeks, and she was arrested. And then the next year she went back. And this time she said, we're going in and we're staying there until the Navy stops the practice.
But the Navy warned protesters it would not halt its shelling exercises. Tensions were already high when the Navy denied allegations that the practices were responsible for higher rates of cancer among the people of Vieques. And the resistance grew louder when a local security guard was killed by a stray bomb. There was real fear among the demonstrators that something could go wrong.
And she wrote this letter to us saying that it's not because she doesn't love us, but it's because she loves Puerto Rico and loves the people of Vieques, and that it's what she has to do. So that she's going in, even though they have said that they're not going to stop the practices, and that she hopes to come back. But if she doesn't, it's okay because she's going to be with my dad, and because she is sure that if anything happens, this is what is going to get the Navy to stop practicing in Vieques.
Actor Edward James Olmos, civil rights activist Al Sharpton, Puerto Rican singer and songwriter Danny Rivera, and former U.S. Representative for Illinois Luis Gutierrez were among the protesters.
The second time it was 2 years later. It's a Republican administration. It's after September 11th attack on the United States of America. And we're still protesting against the military intervention and the use of the island of Puerto Rico. So it's a different moment. And so the severity is different. We used fence cutters to cut the fences that the military had put up. And yes, we trespassed onto the military installation, as they called it, on the island of Vieques, where they would bomb and use it for bombing practices. And it took them about an hour and a half. And this time it wasn't civilian, right? No, this time it was the U.S. military. And the U.S. military is military police. They're pretty rough. They make you kneel and they make you lay down in the dirt. They make you kneel in the rocks. They put you in a pen. Think of a chain link fence, right? surround. Maybe it's about 12 feet high with barbed wire all around, and they placed us all in there. It rained, and so we got wet. The wind came through and we spent the whole night there.
While in custody, Gutierrez was handcuffed, thrown to the ground, and kicked by military police, as Velda would later testify. The military said Gutierrez, then an acting congressman, had resisted arrest, a charge Gutierrez denies.
This time, it was a much more dangerous because there were no cameras. There was no radio, there was no TV, there was nobody there to watch. And in the darkness of the night and with there being no one to watch what they were doing, the abuse was greater.
That night, the group of politicians, civil rights activists, labor leaders, musicians, and actors, both from Puerto Rico and the United States, stuck together.
Wow. Velda, she was wonderful and telling her stories and putting on her skits, and Danny was great and singing his song. And there was poetry and there was joy, right, of those that were protesting there. And we used our language and our culture and our poetry, right, to sustain us through the night.
This time, the protesters were sent to jail and prosecuted by U.S. attorneys. Federal jail was not pleasant for Velda. She was overweight and claustrophobic, and for the first 24 hours held in solitary confinement. A judge would ultimately let her go on probation. And I have to say, one of my most surreal teenage experiences was in court as my grandmother was being tried. I mean, mi abuela in court for civil disobedience. Who can say that?
In the end, let's remember something very, very critically important. We won. We beat the most powerful military ever put together in mankind. And they left. And they left because they were ashamed, right? To have to look through, to be seen through the eyes of the world as a military that abuses its own people. Because, hey, if you want to bomb, why don't we ever bomb the coast of Florida? Why don't we do it along the coast of LA and San Diego? Why is it the colony of Puerto Rico, the weakest politically organized people that are citizens of the United States, why is it that there that you bomb?
Just a year later, my abuela Aya was ready to embark on another battle. She led an anti-pornography campaign to limit when and where certain reggaeton videos could be broadcast, like when children were expected to be in the audience, like in the US. The anti-pornography campaign had the support of her party, religious groups, and morality advocates that had tried to control sexual content in media for years, as well as regular folks worried about what their kids were watching after school. The key was to limit, not ban, when and where reggaeton songs and music videos could be aired. What sparked this crusade, as she would call it? For one, she was worried about what young, impressionable teenagers, like me, could get from listening to reggaeton music and its sexist message. More importantly, there were also claims about minors performing in some of the videos.
And she wanted to investigate that because she was told that girls as young as 14 were being used in these videos, perreando. And that worried her a lot, the hours of the day that these videos were on air, because little kids were watching that. And she said, we are sexualizing little kids, and this is terrible.
Needless to say, one of the first people to feel the pressure was Héctor El Flaco Figueroa, who after being arrested was brought in front of the Senate hearing.
Me trataron de meter cargos por usar menores de edad en los videos.
They tried to charge me for using minors in the videos. That's when I found out that some girls who'd appeared in a lot of videos were minors. They were being searched for because they'd been under the care of the Department of Family and Children's Services of Puerto Rico, and they'd escaped.
In one of the videos, one of the girls is shown acting out sexual acts with condoms and such on the nightstand. Other videos were shown of girls in thongs, girls dancing perreo, and all the close-up images El Flaco specialized in and that the public loved.
La audiencia en el Senado, que ponen en esa pantalla.
During the hearing in the Senate, they had this big screen and they played these edited clips of the music videos. It was rough. I'm seeing this and man was I embarrassed. I said, damn, this time I really crossed the line. And as I was watching that, I said, wait, let me not stir this too much because I'm going to lose my neck. I had to look at it from the commercial side. You understand? Let's look at it positively. Let's find the happy medium because I don't want this to affect the business.
The hearings were just one battle in a larger culture war between lawmakers and the thriving reggaeton industry. The public started taking sides in the debate, with Senator Gonzalez as the principal focal point. Those who opposed the form and substance of the anti-pornography campaign did so for a number of reasons. This is Professor Petra Rivera Rido.
Reggaeton is not alone in this idea of misogyny, right? So, we have very beloved, almost untouchable salsa stars in Puerto Rico, like Hector Lavoe or Ismael Rivera, who also had misogynistic lyrics, you know? So I think it's really important to point out that reggaeton as a genre is not unique in its misogyny. But I think what is unique is that it is consistently targeted as something that needs control.
To be fair, Hector Lavoe and Ismael Rivera weren't as explicit as, say, La Combi Completa.
I also think it's telling with the anti-pornography campaign that, again, we're talking about 2002. So we're talking about a music that had been around for a long time at that point. Women had been dancing perreo to reggaeton for more than 10 years at that point. They didn't run the anti-pornography campaign when it was working class girls dancing perreo. They didn't care. It was when reggaeton was attracting middle class girls or girls who went to Catholic school or whatever.
I mean, I had been perreando since my friend's first party de Marquesina, circa 1995 or 96. And I went to Catholic school. Some, like Rivera Rido, claim it wasn't so much about what was being sung or shown, but who was speaking up. In this case, people from the caseríos, from the low-income public housing projects. It was the same thing that people used to say about Puerto Rican bomba or Argentine tango, or even Dominican merengue back in the day, before it went mainstream.
We're not worried about Juan Luis Guerra singing Burbujas de Amor, which is if you really think about it, one of the dirtiest songs out there.
Yeah, he does say wet inside you and, quote, I want to touch my nose on your fishbowl and make love bubbles. But hey, the difference is, at least he used metaphors. In reggaeton, they would call a fishbowl by its name.
It's about who is singing and performing the song and how, right?
Rivera Rido says racism and classism were behind some of the opposition to the growth of the genre in the island.
We can't have these unruly black bodies perreando all over the place. But if you are somebody who looks respectable, which means you look whiter, and you're not perreando all over the place, and you can sing your romance song, you can sing your song without too many bad words, then we love you, right? But listen to Gasolina and oh my God, everybody's getting pregnant.
Ivy Queen, La Caballota, the godmother of reggaeton, if you will, was one of the artists that felt those who said reggaeton degraded women lumped in all the apples in one basket.
I was upset at your grandma because I was like, oh my God, how can she say que esta música degrada? She has time to sit down and listen to my music, you know? It was like, oh my God, pero porque ella mete todas las manzanas en una canasta?
During the height of the public debate, Ivy was invited to a talk show hosted by longtime TV personality and journalist Carmen Jovet to discuss the claims being made against the movement.
I was raised with your grandmother image, you know what I mean? Yo siempre tenía un buen concepto de Doña Belda hasta que ella hizo eso y nos llevan donde Carmen Jovet y ella entra diciendo todo lo que estaba diciendo.
While they were on air, Ivy claims Jovet brought on a surprise guest, a wide-eyed Velda on a mission.
And I was like, oh God, la criada malcriada, I love you. But let me tell you what it is. Your grandma was getting the heat and bringing the heat, you know?
Her main thing about reggaeton was not just, the explicit lyrics and the exposure to children, but it was the whole thing about women, because she had fought to pass the first law against domestic violence. And you were singing about domestic violence. You had the same message and the same goal.
I think that's why it hurt so much, right when that happened en ese programa, en ese momento, en esos años.
What did she say? What hurt you the most?
Basically, todos estos muchachos degradan a la gente y esta ley la vamos a pasar y yo lo voy a lograr. We're going to win and they got to tone it down on the videos. She was right. She was right. But there was a girl in the panel and she was judging all of us. I was like, oh my God, we are set up. We came here to being ripped apart.
Despite all of this, Ivy and Velda would end up resolving their differences.
Nosotras teníamos el mismo hobby de ir a jugar las maquinitas. And one day I'm sitting down and she's there and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take advantage and I'm going to talk to her. Because I
What did you tell her?
I'm sitting playing the maquinita and she was sitting there and then yo le dije, Velda, ¿cómo está? And she was like, hola, ¿cómo está? Yo le dije, Velda, ¿usted se acuerda? Yo le digo, oh my God, I feel terrible. I never get to explain you know, that my music is different. You was judging everybody and putting everybody inside a basket and saying, all the apples are rotten. My work is different. You know, I was so upset, you know, that my job is so complicated. I'm trying to elevate the ladies to another level. And from that day on, every time that we see each other, nos saludábamos con mucho cariño.
By 2002, reggaeton had become so popular that banning it was not only unconstitutional, but also impossible. And that was fine. To my knowledge, Velda never wanted to silence the music, or any art form for that matter, but rather set some guidelines to control who was watching these sensitive videos. And this part of her legal reform was upheld. Meanwhile, El Flaco Figueroa couldn't help but think he was being scapegoated.
Una de las cosas es que dijo mi abogado, bueno, si realmente son unas chicas que están desaparecidas.
One of the things my lawyer said was, if they really are girls who've been missing, who've been in the custody of family and children's services, they've been missing for a year, supposedly escaped. And El Flaco has cast them in videos that have been on television for more than a year. How's it possible you've not found them? They've been in like 5 or 6 music videos?
El Flaco was acquitted, but ended up retiring from making music videos. Looking back, he says, reggaeton won the battle against the anti-pornography campaign and the culture war.
Ahí fue como que el boom, lo que dio el boom internacional a estos artistas.
That was like the boom. It gave these artists an international boom. They started appearing on MTV, and they began appearing in the news in the United States, suddenly in the pages of the Boston Herald, the Miami Herald, in newscasts across Latin America, everything that was happening with the movement. Velda's legacy was to give the genre international promotion. I think it was the biggest unpaid promo in the history of the genre, because that's what it was. That opened doors for us everywhere.
If my grandmother were alive, she'd tell you what she told me often. Everybody won. Her legislation pushed artists to use metaphors, and the amazing beats she always thought were great could now make it on the radio at every hour, not just in Puerto Rico, but far beyond.
Los obligó a realmente usar la cabeza a la hora de escribir.
The law made them really use their minds when it came time to write, says Ivy Queen.
Yo siempre he dicho que como figura pública, en este caso como artista, músico, punto, debemos crear conciencia, ¿verdad? Y crear música que 50 años más tarde, cuando usted lo escuche, no se avergüence de lo que dijo.
Ivy has always said that as public figures, as musical artists, they should raise awareness and create music that 50 years from now, when they listen to it, it doesn't embarrass them. And in terms of my grandmother, Velda, Ivy says she knows that she was actually a fan of reggaeton. She even saw her dance once. And ultimately, she forced the movement to change.
Ella en verdad forzó a cambiar el formato a something more commercial, which I love.
And for that, Ivy says, Velda should be remembered as somebody who had the guts to overcome anything so that women would be respected.
Porque es importante que sepan como una mujer se armó con las agallas y acabó con todo lo que quería para que respetaran a las mujeres. And that was amazing. For me, that was an amazing moment en nuestra historia.
Amen. Next time on El Flow, reggaeton goes 2.0 and blows up. El Flow is a production of XL Content Studio in partnership with iHeartRadio's My Cultura podcast network. The show is hosted by me, Lilia Luciano, and was created and produced by Vitenis DiGiulis. Production and sound design by Dixo. Additional production by David Quiñones, Mirna Couto, Hermes Ayala, and Natalia Merced. Story editing by Nuria Net. Original music by Truco. Production supervision by Álvaro Céspedes. Executive producers for XL Content Studio are Nando Vila, Isaac Lee, and Alejandro Uribe. Executive producers for iHeartMedia are Connell Byrne and Giselle Bances. For more podcasts from iHeart, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.